Hi, and welcome back to Little House on Laurel. As you can see, I have butternut squash here, fresh from the garden. I actually didn't grow any myself this year. I grew a bunch of pumpkins, but my sister-in-law has a whole bunch, and so she's sharing some with me. So as you can guess, I am making a butternut squash recipe today. I'll be making creamy butternut squash pasta sauce with coconut milk. Of course, butternut squash will be the star of this recipe, and it's the main ingredient. And I'll also be using coconut milk and some wonderful autumn spices that make this sauce delicious. It's also really versatile because you can pour it over pasta or rice or even steamed, roasted, or sauteed vegetables. It's a healthy dinner that the whole family is going to enjoy. This butternut squash pasta sauce is also a great way to use up other winter squashes. You can replace the butternut squash with acorn squash or pumpkins. You can also use sweet potatoes. So this is a great recipe for any squash that you have in abundance. Now, if you prefer, you can replace the coconut milk with milk and a heavy cream. So that would be adding dairy into this dairy-free recipe. You could also use almond milk in place of the coconut milk if you prefer or if you have an allergy to coconut. As you'll see, this recipe uses sage, and you can use dried sage, or you can replace the dried sage with 1.5 teaspoons of freshly chopped sage, which will give it an even better flavor. And if you'd like to add extra veggies into this recipe, once you've pureed your sauce, you can add 1 cup of baby spinach leaves and heat the sauce over medium heat until the spinach is tender. Some tools that you'll need for this recipe are a large saucepan, a cutting board and large knife for cutting up your butternut squash, a high-speed blender, a food processor, or an immersion blender for pureeing, and a can opener for opening the coconut milk. And this can opener is my favorite. It has lasted us for so many years. So if you ever have problems with can openers like we did in the past, then you should give this can opener a try. I'll link to it in the description box. And now I'm going to take you along as I make this creamy butternut squash pasta sauce with coconut milk. First of all, you'll need to cook your butternut squash before you make this recipe. And if you go to my printable recipe link in the description box, that will take you to my blog post, and that has information on 3 different ways that you can cook your butternut squash. The way that I'm showing you right here is by cutting it in half and then roasting it at 400 degrees in the oven for at least 1 hour. So the other versions are to cook it completely whole, or to cut it, peel it, and then cube it and roast the butternut squash on a sheet pan in the oven. So for this version, you want to scoop out all of the seeds. And just so you know, I'm showing you how to do this, but I'm actually going to be using canned butternut squash. Last year, since I had so much squash in my garden, then I canned a bunch, and so I need to use that up. After I cook this squash, I'm going to be freezing it in Ziploc bags so I can use it in recipes later. So after you have scooped out all of the seeds and the stringy pieces, and then you're going to place both halves into a 9x13 pan and drizzle them with some olive oil. And then they're ready to bake. You want to cook them until they are fork tender. Now I'm starting preparations for the butternut squash pasta sauce with coconut milk. You need a 1/2 cup of onion diced, I'm going to melt 6 tablespoons of butter over medium-low heat, and I am actually chopping some fresh sage from our garden. Once the butter is melted, you're going to add the half a cup of onion as well as 4 cloves of garlic minced. And you want to stir that up and let that saute for about 5 minutes until the onions are translucent. I'm also getting some water started boiling for the pasta. Now you can see I'm opening up the canned butternut squash and adding that. And then I added half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper. Now I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons of freshly chopped sage, or you can do half a teaspoon of dried sage, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, and then 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. We're going to cook everything together for about 2 minutes until the spices become fragrant. Now I am using a high-powered blender to puree the squash, so I'm taking everything from the saucepan and transferring it to the blender. If you have an immersion blender, then you can keep everything in the saucepan and just puree it in there. I'm going to puree until smooth. And then add the blended squash mixture back to the saucepan. Then you're going to add the 1 cup of coconut milk. Now if you wanted to use dairy instead, you would do half a cup of milk and half a cup of heavy cream. So stir the milk into the squash puree, and then you're going to heat it until it is to the temperature you prefer for serving. So I heat it over medium heat and just stir it often. Now I'm pouring in the pasta to boil. And now I'm getting ready some chicken sausages. These are pre-cooked chicken sausages, and I'm just slicing them, and I'm heating up some oil. I'm going to saute them so that they're brown. This is just a good way to add some protein to this dish. You could also add meatballs. And the chicken sausage flavor I'm using is Gruyere cheese and garlic. It's really good. And the pasta that I'm using is einkorn pasta. If you've never heard of that, that is what I prefer to use. It's a whole wheat pasta, and einkorn is actually an ancient grain, and so it's never been hybridized, and it's organic. And I will put a link to that product in the description box as well. And to serve, you're just going to pour the butternut pasta sauce over the noodles and add some fresh Parmesan if you prefer, and your protein. And then I'm serving it with some homemade sauerkraut that I made last week. And you have a wonderful fall meal. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I make new videos every week with farm fresh recipes and simple living ideas to inspire you on your journey to a healthy and happy home.